Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Practicing What We Promote session of PeaceCon at 10 of Alliance for Peacebuilding. We are honored to have you participate in this session with us. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our panelists. First, we have Gabrielle Gay. Gabrielle works at a leading international development organization, Catholic Relief Services, on the impact investing and private sector engagement team, where she leads the knowledge management and learning activities around blended finance, private sector engagement, and marketing systems development. At Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, Gabrielle leads the WCAPS Mentorship Program, the WCAPS Pipeline Fellowships Program, and co-chairs the International Development Working Group, where she focuses on learning about and fostering discussions and actions geared towards decolonizing international development. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Justice Studies from Kent State University and a Master's of Arts degree in Global Affairs and Management from Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. Gabrielle is also an International Career Development Program ICAP Fellow of 2021 and is an alumni of Peace Corps Ethiopia, AmeriCorps Ohio Reading Corps, and the Thunderbird Rotary Club. Gabby will be facilitating and sharing information about how we frame DEI in the peacebuilding arena and on moving to scale what will advance DEI among other organizations. Next, we'll have Jean-Baptiste Tala. Jean-Baptiste is a technical advisor for peacebuilding and justice in Africa and has served with Catholic Relief Services for more than 20 years. Prior to joining CRS, he was a regional advisor for education in his home country, Cameroon, and has served as a coordinator for the Justice and Peace Commission of the Association of Episcopal Conferences in the Central Africa region. Over his career, Jean-Baptiste has facilitated hundreds of peace-building training workshops from the grassroots to the highest levels of government and civil society. He is particularly instrumental in supporting the efforts of the Catholic Church, Caritas, and CRS's country programs to advance social cohesion and reconciliation. In this vein, he is the author of a major CRS peacebuilding tool, The Ties That Bind, Strengthening Social Cohesion and Divided Communities, 2017, and a book chapter, Central Africa Republic, Platforms for Social Cohesion and CRS's Interreligious Action for Peace, Studies in Muslim-Christian Cooperation of 2017. From his knowledge and field experience in administering the 3Bs and 4Ds methodology, binding, bonding, bridging combined with discovering, dream, design, deliver from appreciative inquiry, he drafted the Mini Social Cohesion Barometer, a tool to assess and strengthen social cohesion and divided communities that was recently published by CRS of 2019. Jean-Baptiste will present on the methodology portion of today's session and facilitate the experiential exercise. We will have Mark Haynes, who is a serial social entrepreneur, and he has co-founded two startups, Inclusive America, which is a nonprofit to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in government, and Progressive Shopper, a technology company to harness conscious consumption. Mark is also serving as an associate fellow at the European campus of Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS Europe, and as a senior Lang fellow at Swarthmouth College. Previously, Mark has helped found several social impact organizations, the Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University to engage global leaders to drive social change at scale. The Organ Alliance, now organized to address the unnecessary deaths due to a shortage of transplantable organs, and United to End Genocide to empower citizens and communities with the tools to prevent and stop genocide. Mark has also served as a White House fellow working in the office of Vice President Joe Biden as the National Security Affairs Special Advisor for South America, Africa, and Human Rights. He also served as a research fellow with Stanford University's Center for Human Rights and International Justice. Mark has been awarded several fellowships for social entrepreneurship, including the Ashoka Echo and Green, Draper Richards Kaplan, and Hunt Alternatives Prime Movers. He was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. Haynes graduated from Swarthmore College with a degree in political science and a minor in public policy. He is a grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors and was raised in Quito, Ecuador. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark will be sharing data from his organization, Inclusive America. And at the end of our panelists' presentations, we will begin the Q&A portion of the session. Thank you all for joining us, and I will now hand it off to Gabby Gay to begin the session.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So good evening, everyone, or depending on where you are in the world, good morning or good day. We are so pleased that you have joined us for this panel and demonstration. I know it's the last session of the day, so we appreciate you all hanging in there. My colleagues and I are grateful for the opportunity to share our insights, methods, and even questions with the broader peace-building community as it relates to practicing what we promote. A common thread that ties us all together is peace. Development practitioners, like those who work at Catholic Relief Services, for example, use various frameworks to implement peace-building programs all over the world. Policy-oriented non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, like Inclusive America and Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, ensure we the people have data and information around DEI across the sector, and that we work to promote peace-building concepts and equity in policymaking. And donors like USAID or the World Bank, for example, provide funding and guidance used for developing peace-building programs across the sector. In short, all of these organizational types promote transparency and work towards creating and sustaining peace domestically and worldwide. Sadly, though, our peace-building organizations and organizations that support peace-building work are not diverse enough, equitable enough, or inclusive enough. Our peace-building organizations are also deploying strategies, frameworks, people, and resources to promote and support peace-building elsewhere while failing to address these internal challenges. This isn't to say that, all of these organizations are doing this intentionally, but it is something that we should acknowledge and address. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, many organizations have been called out for seemingly prioritizing and tackling a wide range of equity issues. Examples can include gender equality, disability inclusion, ageism, etc., in their programming while failing to address similar issues internally, explicitly the issue of anti-Black racism, which is kind of what spurred this recent revolution in the first place. International organizations are not exempt. This disconnect shines light on a form of hypocrisy many development practitioners have silently been battling with, and it begs the question of whether these large and influential organizations have the moral high ground to implement such programs in foreign societies without simultaneously improving internal dynamics of equity and inclusion. It has also caused many practitioners to dig deep into the legacies of the organizations they hold in such high regard. But, there's good news. In recent years, the peace and security sector has doubled down to emphasize the importance of having a diverse, inclusive, and equitable workforce that is reflective of the plethora of perspectives and lived experiences of those who are closest to the challenges the sector seeks to address. Several governmental agencies and NGOs have conducted diversity audits, they've held public briefings, they've made, pledges to improve diversity and create equitable policies and working environments. There's also been organizations that have diverted funding towards DEI efforts and some have even begun to deliver on their promises. In June 2020, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, analyzed the demographic characteristics of more than 5,750 USAID personnel employed between 2002 and 2018. The agency conducted descriptive analyses of USAID promotional data, conducted adjusted statistical analyses of promotion data, and they were sure to account for factors other than just racial or ethnic minority status, and or gender, that could influence promotion. They also reviewed USAID workforce diversity reports and interviewed USAID officials and employee group representatives. This effort was a big step in goodwill for determining root causes of DEI shortcomings and working to produce better outcomes. The GAO has also published several reports since, including those for the intelligence community and the State Department. Speaking of the State Department also showed a great deal of commitment to these issues by appointing the Honorable Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, an esteemed 30-year diplomat, as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. The Secretary's Office of Diversity and Inclusion advances national security by building a State Department that looks like the America it represents. A more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible department leads to a stronger, smarter, and more creative foreign policy with a better workforce equipped to handle the foreign policy challenges of the 21st century. In addition, several bodies of research have also supported this realization, highlighting that women, children, and people of color need to be making decisions about their own communities and futures. Women are also more likely to broker successful peace agreements and sustain the results. In fact, according to UN Women, a growing body of evidence shows unequivocally that women's participation contributes to the conclusion of talks, the implementation and durability of peace agreements. Efforts like gathering evidence, making pledges, shaking up staffing, and the GAO reports are great, but we can do and must do more. How are we going to begin implementing these promises that we're making? What can donors do to facilitate action? Do they have a role to play? These are just some of the things that we will explore in this session. According to too many, there's a large disconnect between talking about DEI and designing and acting on DEI initiatives. I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that May 25th, 2020 will forever be burned in our collective memory and has arguably catalyzed a massive response to addressing racial justice and other equity issues. This session is designed to offer another idea or solution that can be deployed to address internal diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, which in turn will show our organizations walk the talk and have true integrity. This session will challenge you all to take a hard look at the ecosystems you operate in, interrogate your organizational practices, and hopefully motivate you to recommit to DEI using tools your organization may already have. This session will also examine and provide experiential exposure to practical adaptations of peacebuilding methods, courtesy of Catholic Relief Services, in addition to inviting you all to share the various tools and approaches that you may be using or know of to improve DEI in your own organization. We hope you will walk away with a strengthened sense of duty and ready to go forth and share ideas for organizational solutions, whether adapted, from organizations or derived from your own programming approaches. With that, I will hand it over to my esteemed colleague, co-founder of Inclusive America, Mark Hamus.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Hello, everyone. Am I okay with audio? Great. So I am the co-founder of Inclusive America. And as you heard before, we're trying to make the US federal government to look more like the American people. And the federal government is over 2 million people. And we're starting with initially the 4,000 people who are appointed by whoever is president of the United States. So that includes every ambassador, every cabinet member, and multiple levels below. So it's junior, mid-level, and senior level people. And one of the most important things that we identified as a gap is no one is tracking the demographic makeup of these people who are shaping American policy, including for today's sake, foreign policy and in particular development policy. And so we fundamentally believe that more diversity, equity, and inclusion within the government will hopefully lead to more diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility when it comes to policymaking. And so I want to share a few slides of what we've done to track the data in the senior leadership of some of the most relevant departments and agencies when it comes to foreign policy and with development with you all with some overall headlines. The main takeaway thus far, I think we're a year and a week into the new Biden-Harris administration, is that they are the most diverse in history, but we're not there yet in terms of equity or inclusion. So we do not yet see there to be parity with the American people inside government. And by parity, we look to the US Census. So if women make up 51% of the American people, we hope to see that at every level of government when it comes to gender. And we look at 7 categories: age, gender, race, sexual orientation, disability, religion, and veteran status. We've mostly focused for this session on gender and race. So let me share that with you now. So as you can see, the main takeaways with USAID is that when it comes to gender, it is one of the few departments, housing and urban development is one of the domestic ones, where women are way above parity in terms of representation, which is great news. We do see also when it comes to people of color, which includes women of color, that rate women of color is a subsection of that. They're only at 36, which is a little below. And so what we want to see is that USAID continue as they continue to hire people, that they continue with the successes. But some of the gaps that we've seen is that there are very few, if any, Native Americans or those who don't identify have not done so publicly. And the big gap that we see across the Biden-Harris administration is very few people with disabilities. As some of you may know, 25% of adult Americans, at least in the US, have a disability, and we see very, very few people who identify as having a disability. So here you can see some of those positions that are currently filled and some of the vacancies in the senior positions within USAID. And on the right-hand side, the first column is what this current slide shows. And you can see 91% female, and the US population is on the right-hand side. And I'm happy to share these slides with anyone who's interested afterwards. So that's it on USAID. On Department of Homeland Security or DHS, it's one of 2 departments where we have not found any women at the top 3 levels. So that's secretary, deputy secretary, and undersecretary. So that's a huge red flag for us. There are women in other senior positions, but the top 3, it's straight men. Again, there are people of color. And so the main thing for when we look at Department of Department of Homeland Security is we need more women, or women period, since there aren't any, at least in these senior positions. You can see here in some of the subcategories, there are more women, but we still think it's vitally important that senior leadership has what America looks like. And then finally, Department of State, the largest department in the federal government with political appointees and the perhaps biggest footprint in Americans' foreign policy. We see that there is gender parity is achieved. The most senior positions tend to be filled by all white people. You have to go down to undersecretary to find a non-white person. Bonnie Jenkins, who's one of our undersecretaries and founder of WCAPS, we're really excited about. She's one of those people of color, women of color, in those senior positions, but we're still troubled that if you look at secretary, we have 2 deputy secretaries, counselor. Right now, it's only white people. And so the other big gap that we've seen specifically in the State Department is very few Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, Hispanic, sometimes some of the same terms for some of the same community. We see very few of those, especially Latinas, in senior positions. So here's a quick overview. As you can see, Bonnie on the bottom left, and Uzra is also another woman of color in a senior position, but the other positions very whites dominated. We don't include in this section for right now ambassadors, which there's about 188, I believe. So Biden just named 2 yesterday for Sudan and South Sudan. So we're actively trying to track what the ambassador corps looks like, both for those that are more political, and obviously there's career ambassadors as well. And so these are some of the other senior positions that are within the State Department. So overall, things are going great. One of the main policy recommendations we have for the Biden-Harris administration and future administrations is that they need to have an inclusion rule where you can't just interview, if you're going to interview someone for the job, you can't just interview one type of person. The NFL has a rule that hasn't shown that much success called the Rooney Rule, where they have to interview people of color for an NFL coach. There's been, they can keep still hiring white people. There's another rule the legal community has called the Mansfield Rule, which is not as strong as quotas, which some countries like Rwanda, there's some Scandinavian countries that look at with regards to gender. But we really recommend a rule that you can't hire any position if your candidate pool is only one type of demographic category. We need to ensure that the funnel of people who are applying for these jobs or going through the interview process look like America. And that way, if you can improve the top of the funnel, we hope that as they go through the recruitment process, that we can ensure a more representative government. I'll stop there. How do I stop?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing with us. Next, we'll have Jean-Baptiste Talla. You're still on mute, John.
Hello, can you listen to me? Great. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. And really thank you to be part of this panel. I was very pleased to see how Gabrielle framed the issue. We are preaching peace, we are preaching inclusion, we are preaching respect, but do we live it in our own organization? I'm not going to do statistics as Mark did about CRS, but I'm just going to share with you how at CRS we are trying to increase equity, respect, inclusion, and diversity at CRS. This has become really a key, how can I say, a key focus for all the agencies. And we work in peace building. Around the world, we try to promote peace. We use some tools to promote peace. And we discovered that the tools we are using to rebuild broken relationships in diverse community, in conflicted community, those tools can also be useful to increase respect and bring us to walk the talk, to live what we're preaching. So I'm going to share with you about this tool that we call the 3B4Ds and show you how these tools that was previously conceived to reconcile people in the broken communities has now been used to increase internal, how can I say, internal respect, internal inclusion at CRS. I hope this will work properly. Now, let me bring you first to understand what the 3B is about. So you will charge this approach that was conceived to rebuild peace in broken society has been adapted to ready at CRS. The 3B4Ds, as you can see, is a layering of 3B with 4Ds. The 4Ds are the pillar of the appreciative inquiry. And you know, the appreciative inquiry believes that human relationships prosper where there is a positive view. And we found that at CRS, if we can cultivate positive view, this could really help us to build good relationship and also to be able to walk the talk of respect that we aim to bring around the world. And the first D is discover. Most of the place we discover that most of the people who have negative perception on themselves, or negative perception of the way the place they are working, or negative perception on the world, are most of the people who are engaged in violence, or are most of the people who do not think about how to get committed to the future. So the first D is really to bring people to discover that they are an access for the community, the access for the organization. And when somebody can discover that is a goal for the humanity, this person can then dream. And dream is to project yourself and see how better you can contribute to a better life, not just for you, but also for people around you. And when you dream, you need to design. That means to think about what are the steps that can bring me to achieve my dream. And when you design, you need to deliver. Deliver is the practical way of putting in practice some activities that can really that can help you to bring your dream true. And we combine this approach from the appreciative inquiry with the 3Bs: naming, binding, bonding, and breeding. We discovered that the change starts by yourself. If you want, most of the time we point the fingers to others, they have to change. But we need to start by changing ourselves. So with the first B, binding, is a matter of bringing a person to reflect on himself, to discover who he are, and then if there is a need, to help him overcome some traumas that he has gone through and that block him to achieve his own personal goal. And the bonding is about strengthening relationship within the respective identity group. And as you see with the bridging, it's really to bring different identity group together and see how together we can work for the humanity. So we combine these two approaches to have what we call the integrated frame. And this integrated frame was conceived to rebuild broken relationship amongst community. We have been working in Central African Republic, in Cameroon, in more than 15 countries where we experienced and found that this approach was successful to rebuild that relationship amongst people. Now, when at CRS, we decided 2 years ago to increase already, that means respect, equity, diversity, and inclusion at CRS, and to bring this as, how can I say, to get involved all our staff in reflecting how this can become reality. We found that by adapting this 3B4 this approach, he can create a venue where we can discuss burning issue peacefully and find solution to us. And by doing that, we try, as you can see, to combine the 3Bs and the ready space. You can see the different question in the graphic. And this question really helped us to think through how, in terms of respect, do I respect the others, or do I respect other people? And am I respected in spite of who I am, in spite of my ethnics, in spite of my color, in spite of my gender? And in terms of equity, do I treat other and do I feel treated rightly in spite of who I am? And those questions, you can see them for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in terms of bonding, they are the same question, but now speaking to the group. And the group could be a country program. The group could be a dependent in a country program, where people coming together, people are working all together, ask themselves, And our intra-group relationship center on recognizing each of us dignity. And by asking this question, you see, you reflect on how you as a person, but also as a group, can move towards a shared vision. We then discover that really, as Amanda Gorman said, there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it. We are surrounded by light, but we need to see it. But when you see it, you need to be it. And we need to be brave enough to be it. And we want to be it, and we really discover that the three before this can lighten our individual and collective paths to ready. Concretely, how does this work? I want to share really the practical way of doing things with you. In country program, we already started testing this approach in country program. And in this country program, we try to contextualize ready vision. When we talk about contextualizing, it's because at the level of the agency, we already have some definition, some foundation, our values, our mission, our goals, who really bring us to be together while we are working. But we want to improve ready in the organization. Now, countries are different. Because countries are different, they need to develop a contextualized vision, but base that include, or can I say that integrate, or that is inspired by CRS vision. And that's why the process we use in country is really to start it by thinking about the foundation of who we are, our mission. All this based on Catholic social teaching, fortunately, that really recommend to us to work with people of all faiths, and even with people who do not believe, to work with them, and also to deliver our services without any discrimination. We are also inspired when we are reflecting on discovering issue, bringing people to discover at the country program. We try to understand, to discuss about respect. What does it mean? And we discover that the word respect means many things. We did an exercise with group, asking people, what do you think about respect? Respect has many meanings according to people. All these concepts that we want to put in practice have different meaning. But from this different meaning, we try to go through a process that brings us to build a contextualized shared vision. And I want just to share with you a sample of those shared vision that become like star to help some country program to move towards ready. I hope you can see here two cases. One is from Kenya, Somalia, because we applied it in Somalia. When we were invited by Kenya, Somalia, we applied the approach to have a vision. And you can see this vision is really positive. We have also another vision from Cameroon. And the process of building is to go from individual, inspired by CRS mission, CRS vision, and design a vision that is contextualized according to the country program in which we are working. I'm not going to read them, but you can see how this really can galvanize, can stimulate people to engage of doing something good. But when you have a vision, it's not enough. It's like your dream. Now, how are you going to put this dream in practice? And to put this in practice, the first stage is to see where you do stand. And to see where you do stand, we developed and adapted another tool we were using for conflict transformation. The barometers, it was a social cohesion barometers. And now, as you can see, we adapt it to ready and have what we call the ready barometer. And with the ready barometers, what we do is really to assess the different sphere of ready. We try to assess respect. As you can see, we have 6 questions. And those 6 questions, we have also the scale, how people appreciate the question, and this is anonymously. That means you enter your response without knowing what other people are thinking. And you have from not at all to fully. But you see, we add at the end, I don't know. Because we discovered that sometimes people do not respond because they don't know. Or some people keep quiet just because they don't know. But we need to take this into account if we really want to improve ready for all our staff. And you can see we have, first, you can see we have P. P is personal. We have 2 questions on P. I is inter-individuals, and O is organizational. So we developed this, we adapted these tools to ready, and you can see we have assessing respect, but we also have let me move. We also have assessing diversity, but I think we escaped the other one. Assessing equity, and you can see you have those questions that we also ask to make sure that we take into account what every person come out as he is feeling himself in the organization in terms of equity. We also have another one with diversity. And you can see the question. I'm going very quick because we are going to do a practical exercise, at least with one of the sphere, to see how we really work to bring people to open door to peaceful reflection on key issues in country program. And finally, we have accessing inclusion. And from these barometers, we try to see where people do stand, how they appreciate ready in the country program. And from this appreciation, we reflect on now, how can we transform the situation, the actual situation, to achieve the dream that we design. And in this process, after the practicing of the barometers, which is part of deliver, we reflect about the factors that can impact us positively or negatively. We discuss about stakeholders, people who can help us to move, or people who also can avoid us to move ahead. And from all this, we use another metaphor. I think you know about the traffic light. All of us know about the traffic light. We use the metaphor of the traffic light to bring us to think about how to bring the change in the agency. You know, the red color is stop, don't do it again. The yellow is pay attention, and the green is doing. So after discussing about all the factors, to start thinking about how practically, how to deliver, we ask every person to do his own personal traffic light. What do I have to stop as person? What do I have to pay attention on? And what do I have to do more? But we also ask people to discuss about what do we as a team have to stop? What do we as a team have to be paying attention on? And what do we as a team have to be doing more? And this really brings us to design a plan of action that takes into account everybody desire, everybody needs, and we come from people. And when people design the plan of action by themselves, they are very committed to it. So, my dear, because of time, I was running a bit to bring you to understand that approaches we are using for peace building can also help us to walk the talk in our own agency. And CRS is trying to apply the 3B for this to do that. But to make sure we understand at least how this works, we felt that we could do a Mentimeter together. And it will be the interaction session for us. Do a Mentimeter at least for one of the sphere. And we are going to do that with the, I think with the respect sphere, and see what if we were member of the same organization, all of us attending this workshop, attend this meeting today. How do we feel about respect in our organization? I will invite you to think about your own organization while you are responding to the question. But at the end, you will see how our different response generates something that if we were from the same organization, it will bring us to discuss about how can we improve respect in our organization. If you allow me, I will invite a colleague of mine who graciously accepted to provide me support in for the Mentimeter to come in, and I will stop sharing my screen, and she will take us through the Mentimeter. I'm calling up Nell Bottom, who is the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Peace Building at CRS, who will take us through the Mentimeter. But after, I will come back to show you how it really works. Nell, are you there? Hello, Nell. Maybe she is on mute. But if she is on mute, at least you can see the question, and maybe I can share with you, you know how to use. People already started filling it. And you see, we have the first question, my opinion and expected. Think about your organization. And you have the code for the Mentimeter 22, 83, 01, and 15. Use the code, and then we will see how this works. Then if you are able to join us, please do. Maybe it's technical problem.
Hi, John Baptiste. She is working on it now. They're just working through a few technical difficulties.
Oh, you know, technique sometimes help us, but also sometimes bring us to have little problem.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, great. You are back. Yes, Nell.
Yes, I'm so sorry for the difficulty, but it does look as though people were able to join the Mentimeter poll. In case you missed those instructions in the room chat, we have put a link you can copy and paste, or you can just go to the website www.menti.com, and you put in the code 22830115, and you should have access to the questions in this poll. This is the first indicator that you see. Let me share my screen again, because it has, when I refreshed my browser, it went away. But hopefully you will see it now. Okay, so Jean-Baptiste, we can perhaps give it another moment for others to get to the poll and be able to answer. This is the first indicator at the personal level. As you heard in Jean-Baptiste, there are two indicators at personal, interpersonal, and organizational level. Great. So I would also invite you, we'll go through these 6 indicators in the respect sphere. If anyone wants to put a comment in the chat about any observations you have about these results as they're coming in, or if you want to raise your hand and make a comment as we go along, please do feel free. Jean-Baptiste, with your permission, I may move on to the next slide. I think we have a pretty even distribution in this case between the somewhat and fully responses in terms of people feeling that in their organizations, their opinions are respected.
Yes.
Great. So moving on, there we go, to the second personal level indicator. My concerns are taken seriously. Here we also see a bit of a spread, but largely between the good and very good. I see there's different response options here, but not uniformly. we do have at least one answer that it comes in at very little. I see a really interesting comment. Thank you, Janet, and maybe Jean-Baptiste, you can respond to this as we go along, that the questions are interesting, but perhaps might be hard to answer at organizational level because every team or every division might be different. Would you like to address that?
Yes, I can just say that it's true, teams are different, but what is happening is as a at your personal level, as a member of the team, you have your own appreciation. You have your own way of looking at things. And you will see how this result generates a graphic that we can all discuss from the graphic. And by discussing, sometimes this brings us to fix our idea. And you see, we have, I don't know. I don't know bring us really when we cannot respond to do it. But we are member of organization. We see how policy are implemented. And we can at least, a member of organization, express ourselves and say, okay, we think that this is working or this is not working. That's what I can say by now and then.
Thanks, Jean-Baptiste. I can move on to the next screen.
Yes.
I think you did also share with us that to date this ready barometer has been used sort of at a country office level, and there's also been interest from some divisions. So I do think there is also that interest at looking at it at different levels. Okay, there we go. This is the first indicator at the interpersonal level. Staff treat each other with dignity. Here again, most answers are going into the good and very good categories. And shall I move on now to the next interpersonal indicator, which is that staff support each other during difficult times. I think we're starting to see a bit of a pattern here, Jean-Baptiste, in sort of a split between good and very good. There was a comment, an interesting comment about I think the way the responses were framed on the first personal indicator, wanting to know about sort of the somewhat. Why would someone feel that their opinions were somewhat respected instead of fully? Here we have slightly different wording on the indicator choices, and slightly more lean in this indicator towards very good over good. Any comments you wanted to make here, Jean-Baptiste?
I think at the beginning, we were using this scale, but we decided to use the other one that was not appropriate. I think, unfortunately, we did not do all the change. But I think at the end, we will see the result, and from the result, we could analyze. Thank you to bring that up.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. So then moving to the last category, the organizational indicators. This is the first organizational indicator. The leadership cares about all of the staff. Once again, a pretty even split. I think we have some colleagues who work at great organizations. Jean-Baptiste, was there any comment you wanted to make here, or shall I move to the next?
Just a minute, Nell. But I think we will make the comment at the end. I think we are now going to the last one.
Okay. And finally, second organizational indicator, there are sufficient opportunities to participate in decision-making processes without fear. Here we see a lot more variety in the responses than we saw on the previous indicators. And I think you'll probably want to discuss that a little bit.
Maybe if the people can comment on this last one before we move, that would be great.
Would anyone like to comment on what they observe here or what might be going on with these results?
No comment in the chat. If
Let's
there is no
see.
comment, Nell.
Yeah, there is a comment. Thank you, Jessica, about perhaps there are certainly limited opportunities to engage with decision making at different times. So that could limit the responses. But the question of decision making power compared to fear or contribution is an interesting question of how to develop. And there's also an observation, thank you, Suzanne, about noticing in the results across different indicators that there's a difference between the level of the interpersonal relationships and then the organizational decision making being something quite different at that level. And that the fear is very specific. People could feel that their input is not welcome or appreciated. So it's the additional clause you have here about decision making without fear that is, I think, provoking a little bit of further reflection for folks. So Jean-Baptiste, with your permission, I'll go ahead and stop this screen share and turn it back to you. I do notice that the results have just changed.
The results have changed.
Yes, there's an additional, at least one additional answer. I saw the very little bar just jumped up a bit.
Okay, I have to change the result too.
Okay.
Okay, Nell. Now, to show people how this really generates the result, let me now share my screen with you. I hope this will work. I know sharing the screen is not. Okay, you see what I did. Can you listen to me? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You see what we do, what we did is just to take the result you gave us and we enter the result in this Excel graphic that was prepared before. And you can see at the end, we have 15 people who responded. But time to time, we did not have response. And what we used to do, when we don't have response, we suppose that maybe the question was not clear. Maybe the person did not understand the question. Maybe the person did not want to respond. So what we do normally, we add 1 here for I don't know, 2 for I don't know, 1 for I don't know. So we have 15 respondents. And immediately, you can see, please, can you see the graphic that generated?
Yes.
You see, you have down there, not at all, very little, somewhat, fully, I don't know. And for the first question, my opinion are respected. If we were member of the same organization responding to this question, we could have seen that, okay, we think we are doing good in terms of respecting people's opinion in our organization. Even though there are people who say somewhat or fully, there are some differences, but at least this is good for us. Now, if we go to my concern are taken seriously, even though our opinion are respected, there are some people, at least one person, who feel that his concern is not taken seriously. And this really could have bring us to start discussing what is the problem without naming any person And this creates really a peaceful environment where people discuss about the factors, about really deep issue without pointing fingers on others. And if we move to staff treat each other with dignity, you can also see that the differences between how people appreciate, and we can think about what are the factors that bring us to be at this level. And as you can see, we have the graphic that was generated for each one. This was just a sample to show us how from the barometers we can create a venue for people to discuss about the factors that can help improving how we applied, we testify what we teach to others, how we do that in our organization. And as told you before, after this discussion, we don't stop with the discussion. We use the fire metaphor, the stick line metaphor to think about what do I have to change? What do I have to change as personal level? What do we have to change as in our country program? And what can we advise organization to change to ensure that ready become reality in our organization? My dear, this is what I really wanted to share with you, just to show you how tools that we are using for peace building can also be adapted to be used as tools to help us to walk the talk, to help us to really put our face, put our mission, put our values, the value we teach others, to go from just teaching and put it in practice. And as used to say that this is a way of doing what we call our journey from the head to the heart. That means to bring all what we know, all what we preach, to bring also in our heart and try to live it with people. So now I want to stop here and give the floor to my other colleagues. Back to you.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you also, Gabby and Mark, for your presentations. Right now, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of today's session. So I'm going to give the audience a little bit of time to drop their questions into the room chat box. And we'll give about 1 minute for you all to type in your questions. Thank you. You may proceed. And also, if you choose not to type your questions, but you'd rather raise your hand, just use the raise hand function, and that way we'll know that you want to ask a question. So I see that we have some questions rolling in, and I'll go ahead and start presenting those questions to our panelists. And as our panelists, if you have the answer to this question, feel free to answer the question. And audience, if you are directing your question to a specific panelist, please type their name at the end of your question. Okay, I'll begin with Jonathan Cohen's question. So, Jonathan says, thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Is it possible to read more about the work that you have done on this? Jean-Baptiste, I will let you answer.
Yes, it's possible to read. The tools that we are developing and adapting are available. And especially the approach, the 3 before this approach was developed in a manual that is called The Ties That Bind, who describe the manuals. And the adaptation, we are in a process of having an agenda that in few weeks we are going to test in a region of CRS to see how this agenda work, and if it work properly, to advise that can be used. So if Jonathan want to get in touch with us, we could share with him the tools. Even the assessment grades, we are ready to share it with all of us. If you can also try it in your own organization, and if you have some comment, how to improve things, we are open to listen to you. And we are welcome also your comment by writing.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Now, next we have Jessica's question for Mark. She says, given how sensitive these questions and data tend to be to collect, their self-reported nature and access to these distinct government populations, I'm wondering if you could speak a little more about, or a little more to your methodology for collecting and verifying this data. To you, Mark.
Great, thanks for that. Thanks, Jessica, for your question. Our methodology is evolving. And so in terms of the aggregate data, OPM, Office of Personnel Management, has that data. Gabrielle mentioned GAO. They do individual department and agency DEIA reports. So we're able to look at the aggregate data on that. As it gets down to the individual level, it's a combination of we have no idea, we don't make anything up. And the gold standard is for the person to self-identify how in each category. So what we try to do is scour as many different data sources, whether that's government or like when Biden says Janet Yellen is the first woman to be Secretary of Treasury, we then tag her as female. In her professional bio, she identifies as Jewish. So there's other categories that we are able to use trusted third-party sources to tag them. People in political positions also belong to affinity groups. So there's like Black 44, LGBTQ 44 for those who served the lots of the Obama administration. And so that's another identifier. Sometimes they write op-eds and say, we are the Latino appointees from the Clinton administration, and we want to comment on whatever immigration policy, let's say under Trump. So they also identify that way. So our hope is to tag everyone as best as we can with open source sources, and then to reach out to each person and say, is this information both accurate and can you help us fill it in? Because when it comes to things like disability, religion, sexual orientation, those tend not to be as well reported. There is a form for government appointees to fill out. And so we're trying to see if that report can be expanded to covering all 7 categories of protected class, so people can feel that they can voluntarily report on all these categories, not just gender, race, and disability.
Thank you, Mark, for answering her question. And she also says that is truly a fascinating approach and truly a labor of love. And to collect, clean, and concatenate and curate such critical data. So thank you, Mark, for answering her question. And thank you, Jessica, for asking such a question. Next, I'm going to move to Janet's question. Her job at her organization has done a great job of paying attention to parts of DEI like gender, but not so great on disabilities. So her question is, what recommendations or lessons are there for building out more comprehensive DEI initiatives? I'll allow panelists to choose who will answer the question first.
Sure, I can jump in on this one a little bit, just through what I've seen kind of play out before my eyes at Catholic Relief Services. I know we have some really dedicated and gung-ho staff members in our organization that are, and I'll speak to disability inclusion specifically. Leah Eisenhart, she is a champion for disability inclusion, and she has hammered it into everybody's minds in the technical kind of space, and held events even when there were a handful of people, and now everybody's asking her for this expertise and to apply this to different projects. So I think consistency is key in just keeping the conversation relevant and in people's faces. And she started a community of practice and created different spaces for people to consider and talk about disability inclusion, and also highlighted projects that may have been carried out in the past where it wasn't highlighted specifically, but she said, hey, look, we've done this before. How are we going to build upon this momentum and continue to do this in our programming moving forward? So that's on the programming side. And then also in terms of just looking inward, again, I think she was very instrumental in getting us a handicap accessible front door that opened automatically, little things like that. Well, it's actually huge, right? But smaller steps that you can take in your organization to advocate for things that should already be in place or should already be there, I think is the key. And she was just so passionate about it, and brought it up so much that now people are really following her in that. And we'll see. Maybe there will be disability inclusion staff in different regions and different country programs. I think that's something that is yet to be seen, but we're hoping that, as long as she's with the organization and really driving that forward, that could be a possibility in the future. So yeah, that's just one thing. And also, bring the research to the organization. No organization is perfect. If you have the passion and the voice and the ability to do so, then I would say go for it. I will say CRS is pretty unique in the sense that there's a lot of decentralized moving pieces. So, I find it great that we do have, and when I say we, I mean most staff members have the ability to be vocal about things they care about, and vocal about issues that are very pressing in the sector. And we do have a decent amount of influence on our respective teams and, in our respective divisions. That's not always the case for, every organization. But if you work in an organization like that, use that power.
Kendi, this just to make sure this was a question about what more could be done for people with disabilities.
This was a question about asking about her job paying attention to parts of DEI like gender,
yes.
And then what are recommendations and lessons about more comprehensive DEI initiatives?
So I would just say, so just like there are audits for race and gender, there are great organizations and consultants that do disability audits. As we've grown and gotten better, for example, there's a lot of best practices for websites. So if people want to apply for jobs, if people want to learn about resources of your organization or other organizations, it's surprisingly bad how many websites are built that don't take accessibility into consideration. Or I'll just blame us, for example, like here, there's no closed captions that I see right now. Maybe there is the option to turn it on. I know Zoom has done that. So there are more and more tools, just like on technology, that could get people to apply and participate and be part of the organizations that I know consultants and organizations can do audits on. I think exactly to Gabrielle said about physical just ramps and other means for accessibility. One of the things we're trying to do now is, at least I'll speak for governments, it turns out the intelligence community has an exemption to not have to accommodate people with disabilities, which is crazy. So there's a woman, Kristen, she became blind while she was at the CIA. She was able to get a screen reader and seeing eye dog, but it was only because her supervisors provided that or approved that. And so one of the main things we're trying to do with Inclusive America is to get a new executive order that would force the intelligence community to provide the necessary accommodations like the EOC does with any employer. You can't discriminate. You have to provide appropriate accommodations. So we can do this at the senior level. The CIA just months ago, not that long ago, they photoshopped people with disabilities onto their cover of their DEIA report. This is a problem at the largest employer in our country, where the substance, they're still allowed to get an exemption for not accommodating, and they're photoshopping people with disabilities in, just bonkers. They have just created a new chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer. So we spoke about that recently. They know about it. The people involved in that report are no longer involved. But we don't want to lose sight of it. It wasn't like the photoshopping was a problem. There's something systemic and structural. And I think it's great that you raise this organization, because a lot of us, as Gabrielle said, there's always a work in progress. I think with disabilities, it tends to be under counted as something that organizations, including Inclusive America, that we can all be doing a lot more to make sure our organizations are more accommodating and inclusive of people with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your answer. Jean-Baptiste, do you have a response for her question?
No, just to say that this is a call to do more. You know, there are some policy that even speak about positive discrimination in favor of disability people, but I think we don't pay attention to implement it in most of our organization. And I think this is really a call that we should also think more about including people with disability in even in recruitment in what we are doing. Back to you.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you, Mark. Our next question is actually from our panelist, Gabrielle Gay. The question is, what can and should donors do to motivate peace-building practitioners, government, development, think tanks, etc., to turn their work, frameworks, and resources inward? Will mandates work? Leading by example? What do you think that looks like? And could this be a way to scale these initiatives quickly? And how could that backfire? And so these are just thoughts that she is sharing with both the audience and with the rest of our panelists. So audience, if you have an answer to this question, feel free to type it in the chat. Panelists, I will defer to you.
I'm happy to take a quick stab. I've seen a few funders ask in grant proposals sections of what is the DEIA, what are the metrics, how many people of color, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, veterans, so on and so forth, people with disabilities are on your team, how many are on your board, how many are on your senior staff. So I think collecting that data forces, well, it's a good thing because the donor will know, but it also forces the organization to look, if they're not collecting that data, to track that data. So if they see zeros, maybe that should be like a wake-up call, be like, is that just because, you know, just had the chips fell that way, or are there things that we can do better to make sure those portions of our society are part of our organization? Because all the data shows more diverse organizations lead to better outcomes. And so I think that's a really helpful soft touch that funders I've seen start to do, is to ask what the metrics are. Do you have a DEIA policy? What else do you do with regards to DEIA? So I think that's a big thing. In some companies, for example, like are infamous or famous, like Google, some of these are pushing out their reports on how many underserved communities are in their companies and their positions of power. And so part of like the backfire, I don't think it's a backfire, but I think some of what I would like to see funders do, if they're asking that of us, it would be cool to see the funders also report that, because lots of times there's a high correlation between those who have the privilege to give the money tend to come from certain segments of society. I think Susan Rice, she might have been the first, maybe not. Male Pale from Yale is the sound bites that often comes up. And so I think part of when we're trying to advocate, like we've struggled, WCAPS, there's a few other organizations, there are not that many that are trying to make our government more representative. And maybe that's a problem because the funders themselves aren't as representative themselves, and therefore the funding isn't being allocated accordingly. And so I think that could be perhaps a positive backfire if they're asking that of us, what are they doing, and are they making that data public? I really like Jean-Baptiste's comment. Like, I think this has to be instead of like a respect thing, not a blame thing. I think many organizations have gaps. If we look at not just all the segments of society, but if we start looking at intersections, how many people of color with disabilities are in senior positions in many of our organizations? Perhaps very few, or not enough into their percentage of our public. And so I think that's hopefully something that we can talk about and say we need to work on this in a comfortable, responsible way, get funders to do that, and hopefully the entire ecosystem works towards getting better at it.
If I was to say something, I have very little interaction with donors, but I believe we should start at home. We should start at home to put aside even funding to ensure that this happens. I think for us at CRS, this is embedded in our mission, in our vision. It should be part of us. And with or without external funding, I think CRS should be able to do it. And I would love other organizations to take this as commitment from the organization, from inside, to ensure that what we preach to others, we also live it in our own organization. This will be my comment on that.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Gabby, for asking that question. We'll move next to Jessica Baumgardner-Zuzik's question. How do we balance the need for this type of data to improve our work, laws, and public service institutions with potential invasions of privacy? Panelists, you may answer the question.
I'm happy to go first, or Gabrielle, Jean-Baptiste, do you want to go first?
Go first, that's okay.
So this is a legitimate, very, very important question. Sometimes the phrase personal identifying information, sometimes in DC people use acronyms a lot. So PII is a common phrase people talk about that's being violated. There are specific rules that you cannot violate PII. So for example, in the government data collection section, you can't go below, I believe it's 10 people. So if there's a group of people that's less than 10, and let's say there's you can't say that there's a 1% female or 1% person of color, anything like that, because that would probably violate PII. In the case of government, there's usually so many people, there's very few departments, agencies, entities that are less than 10 people. And so that's one category of like, we want to abide by protecting privacy. The other big thing is the gold standard is that people should voluntarily self-identify. That's the best data when people identify. So 25% of adult Americans have a disability. I know Gabrielle had written, not everyone, they're not all physical disabilities, but even those who do, they may not want to self-identify. And so some of these characteristics are across the board, they may be underreported. And I think part of what we're trying to do is a safe and inclusive workplace where people feel comfortable, if they do want to identify, that they feel comfortable doing that. We've seen a big shift, for example, with sexual orientation. Many more people feel comfortable self-identifying in forms than perhaps 20 years ago. And so we want to set the standard that it should be self-reported. We want to give the option that they can report if they want to, and then there shouldn't be any negative consequences of not self-reporting. Part of what we're trying to do is the more data we have, the more we're able to hopefully shape inclusive policies, whether external or internal, based on that data. So if everyone has a disability but no one's reporting it, then it could be that the policies are not then being written and shaped and implemented to ensure all the appropriate accommodations are there because they don't know that people need them. So I think part of that is to try to encourage people if they're willing to self-report, because it really helps shape those policies.
If I could jump in really quickly, I think, thank you, Mark. I agree with everything that you said. I think that a part of it isn't really, I think there's a lot of concern, not necessarily around the privacy, because, hopefully your organization has policies in place to protect your private information or whatever it is that you self-report. I think it still boils down to that safety factor and feeling like I'm turning over this information. I feel safe in doing so, and I'm not going to receive any, differential treatment or, hopefully that information is scrubbed if you're going to be presenting to your organization, for example, the numbers or something like that. You won't be able to be identified by person name or anything like that, given like a presentation or something. But I think it boils back down to safety and feeling like you're giving this information that's going to be used for the greater good and not be, used against you later on down the road or something like that. And I know that's a concern at my organization as well. especially as it relates to sexual orientation, it being a Catholic organization. But we're working on creating a safe environment for folks so that we can collect this information and use it for the greater good.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you, Mark, for your responses. Jean-Baptiste, would you like to answer?
I think I agree with all what they are saying, but if I was to add something, it's just to say that it's a matter of creating a safe environment where people can express themselves. When I speak about the tree before this, I speak theory. This is just talking about, but practically it's an approach that brings people really to do what I call the journey from the head to the heart. And that brings people to be more confident and to participate in decision-making process on what they have to do. And really, when they do that, during the process, they overcome the fear. At the beginning, for instance, in some workshop, people are not willing to speak to others. But after a day, they started speaking to others. They started breaking the barriers and even expressing themselves. And the opportunity given to people to go and speak to others about things, really deep things that they can discuss with people, and people discuss at that. But we need to create a peaceful environment. And for us, this approach is really a place where you create this peaceful environment where people, without pointing fingers or other, can discuss key issues and bring people to take decisions by themselves to do some change at the personal level and to engage in change both at the country program level and at the organizational level. We have tested this approach with armed groups, where people take the decision by themselves, people who were part of killing groups, to become peace builders, and they give their life working for peace. And we felt that with this approach, you can really create this space where people are more confident in expressing who they are without having any fear. But to do that also, they have to build it on the organization vision, organization mission. And I think us talking from CRS organization, I think when we go through our mission, through our vision, we really see that we should be really be an organization where everybody feels safe to speak, safe to express himself. That's what I can say. Really creating a safe environment, a peaceful environment where people can be themselves while they are working with us.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your answers to the question. While we have a little bit more time, I'm actually going to ask you all a question, and also from kind of an audience perspective. So I'd like to know, how can we use the information that you all shared with us today to influence peace building practices in the most practical ways? Say one of the members of our audience is at the head of the organization or their organization in which they work, and they'd like to take some practical steps to the peace building material that you all have given to us today. Can you describe to us how you would go about using or how the audience can best utilize the information that you've given them to influence their peace building practices? And Gabrielle, or Jean-Baptiste, if you'd like to start off first.
Usually I don't like to start, but if you want me to start, just to say that, okay, the material we are developing is available. We can also share those materials. And it's a matter of commitment. My hope is that by going from this meeting today, each of us should also decide to be part of the process of increasing respect, equity, diversity in the organization. It's not a matter of policy of people doing it. It's a matter of all of us getting involved in the process. And the tools we share, I think, can be very useful to all of us. And in terms of, I say, our tools are available, I think, at the end, if Nell is still there, we ask her maybe to put in the chat the link that can take us to material that we create. But you see, here we are showing how peace building tools help us also to clean our own house. Peace building tools can help us to clean our own house. And if we clean our own house, we testify what we preach. And our way of living teach more of discourse. You can ask people to be loving each other, ask people to be diverse, but if they see that you yourself are against what you are teaching, this cannot bring change you are expecting. So we need to be the change we are preaching. So that's what I can say to respond to that question.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Gabrielle?
Sure. Yeah. I agree, Jean-Baptiste. I definitely think, whatever marketing strategies you use to reach people, in order, like if you work at a think tank, for example, in order to talk about DEI and different initiatives and efforts, turn that inwards. Whatever strategies you use to recruit diverse applicants for a proposal that you're planning or designing, turn that inwards. Challenge HR to think about where they do recruiting and where they share, job postings and, outreach even. At CRS, we have a thing called Community Day, which is awesome. And we go and, volunteer at different places across the world, really, actually. Headquarters, they do theirs in Baltimore, but globally, we're all over the place. How do you, who are you reaching out to? Who are you sharing information with about CRS, about the peace building work? How can you reach more diverse audiences so different people get interested in this, career field or in this area of work, peace building, or even broader? One thing that we try to do at WCAPS and that we continue to promote is just making people aware. A lot of these spaces aren't diverse and don't have, as many different types of candidates applying for these positions because they don't know about it. So, expanding that access. When you're implementing a project, what frameworks are you using? We saw the example today from CRS. You can take those principles and those methods of, fostering peace abroad and use it to foster peace with just how we're operating here in your respective offices or in your respective organizations. So just, I guess, dig deep to kind of evaluate what you already have at your fingertips. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and adapt it for, your own purposes internally. So that would be, my big spiel.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Mark, do you have a response for this question?
I agree with definitely everything that's already been said. I'll put a link into the room. We've been thinking about how government can be more, so that some of that could be translatable. The big thing for the framework, I think sometimes people treat DEI or READY or sometimes JEDI, there's different acronyms for some of the same similar stuff, is like a checklist. Like once we hire someone, let's say we hire a woman, boom, we're done. We don't have to take care of it anymore. And that's, you have to be intentional. It's always, it's a constant process, just like fundraising or executing your programs. It doesn't end. So I think shifting that framework of like there's always room to do more. It's an important one. And then exactly what's been said before, it's about looking internally. There's the external stuff, and there's loads of resources. Some people call it like an industry. So there's lots of great books and websites, consultants. There's lots of them who are happy to be hired to help you with either internal, external, or both. And so, I'll stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Jean-Baptiste, for answering all of today's questions. As we close today's panel discussion, Practicing What We Promote session of PeaceCon at 10 of Alliance for Peacebuilding, I'd like to thank Nell Bolton, Alliance for Peacebuilding, Gabrielle Gay, Mark Haynes, and Jean-Baptiste Talla for sharing with us their knowledge of how to improve our peacebuilding efforts in our organizations and in our personal lives. Thank you all for attending our session for today, and we will close for the evening. I hope that you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.